Good morning and welcome to World History 2. Today we're talking about one of my absolute favorite subjects, and that is the Gunpowder Empires. This is the beginning of our Asian Empires unit, and today we're going to focus on the Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals. You don't actually have to know the Safavids for your SOLs, but as the Safavids were located right between the Ottomans and the Mughals, it's kind of important that we at least mention them. So hopefully you listened to the It's Istanbul, Not Constantinople song, and maybe you'll get a little bit of idea of why this is so important to me. I actually lived in Turkey for 4 years, which was the center of the Ottoman Empire. So we have the center of the Ottoman Empire here in Turkey, and we see that it spread into southern Europe and to North Africa, didn't quite get to Morocco, and then much of the Middle East. And then the Safavid empires here surrounded what's present-day Iran, and then the Mughal Empire is located here in present-day India. We'll also be doing separate lessons on the Chinese and the Japanese, who are also part of our Asian empires, but we don't consider them to be gunpowder empires. So what makes these empires gunpowder empires? Well, they basically had 4 things in common. First, they all were Muslims. They all were practicing Islam. Now, the Mughals, they moved to India, which had been predominantly Hindu, but they bring Islam with them. And if you're thinking Mughals, hey, that kind of sounds like Mongols, that's because all of these people originate from Turkic nomadic peoples. And the particular branch of the Mughals is they are actually Mongol Turkic nomadic peoples. And it's Mughal is the word that the Indians called the Mongols. So they all were Muslim, though they do practice different branches. They all were based on military conquest, obviously using gunpowder, hence where we get the term Gunpowder Empire. And they all had absolute monarchies. And they're all going to be kind of different names, which we'll talk about, but they all had that. Now, one of the differences is the type of people that they were ruling over. Only the Safavids had a full Muslim population that they ruled over. The others had different groups that they were ruling over. So, for example, the Mughals had a predominantly non-Muslim population because Hinduism was the stronghold there and still continues to remain the stronghold there today. The Ottomans actually served over a large Christian minority, and consider that they had taken over what used to be the Byzantine Empire. We know that there would be a lot of Christians living there. And then the Safavids are Shiite Muslims. We don't pronounce the T really. And they are living in Iran, which was already a predominantly Muslim area. So here's just another map. We just need to get familiar with locating where all of our empires are. And so one of the little acronyms that I've told my students over the past years. So think about somebody who has the name that starts with an M. So we could do O, snap, Michael, can't jump. The funnier it is, usually the easier it is to remember. So we have the Ottomans, the Safavids, the Mughals, the Chinese, and the Japanese. So O, snap, Michael, can't jump. So we've discussed our differences already, talking about the different type of Muslims that they were. But really the most important thing for us to remember is the fact that they all are actually Muslim. Now today we're focusing on the Gunpowder Empire, so you can see here the green. So again, starting here in Turkey with the capital of Istanbul, spreading into southern Europe, down into the Middle East, and across to North Africa. The Safavids, their capital was Isfahan, which is actually not on this map. And Isfahan, then this is found in modern-day Iran. And then the Mughal Empire found in modern-day India, and of course Pakistan as well. And Delhi was their capital. So where is the Ottoman Empire located? So here we see, we've already kind of talked a little about this already. And if you watch the video, it is Istanbul, not Constantinople, because once the Ottomans take over, they change the name. So it begins in what we call Asia Minor, again, which is Turkey, and then spreads throughout. So if you didn't watch the song, you might want to go back. Now, because I love the Ottomans so much, this is a little joke that I found that's kind of funny. So if you don't get it, I'll explain it to you. So what are all these guys putting their feet on? Well, those things that you rest your feet on are called Ottomans as well. So it's all these Ottomans sitting on Ottomans. Ha ha ha. Little teacher joke. All right, so let's talk a little about their history. So we know that they were originally part of the Seljuk Turks and started again in Turkey. And they basically had conquered everything except for Constantinople, and that was really their goal. They were founded by a guy by the name of Osman, but the one who was successful in finally conquering Constantinople to rename it Istanbul, the city of Islam, is Mehmet. Their warriors for Islam were called Ghazis. And they do actually do all this conquering. They are a very long empire. They actually last up until World War I. So it's the end of World War I that we see the fall of the Ottoman Empire. So this is a long-lasting empire, 600 years. So it's Mehmet the Conqueror that actually conquered Constantinople in 1453. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about his story because I think it's kind of cool. So Mehmet, which is the Turkish word for Muhammad, so many of the leaders were people who were named after Muhammad. So here you can see is the Golden Horn, which is part of that. If you remember that Istanbul or Constantinople at this time period was a peninsula. So to get around this, it's really difficult to attack by sea, to attack land. And the only part that was really kind of a weak spot was down here. This was an entrance here, and they actually had a really large chain. I don't have a picture of the chain. I've actually seen the chain in a museum in Istanbul, and it's almost as tall as I am, and if I was to lay down, like it would be as long as I am. And that's just one link. So this was this huge chain that they drug across the Golden Horn, this body of water. So if there was a friendly ship coming through, you could lower the chain so they could get through. Otherwise, the chain was tight, so if you try to come through, it's going to just rip up the bottom of your ship. So Mehmet gets this idea. Over land here, you can see here, this is in French, but you can see what's happening here is he brings his ships and he actually oils and greases logs, and he places the logs and he'll move the ship, then they take the log from the back, put it in the front, and you roll the ships over. It's this fascinating kind of process. Mehmet, he earns the name the Conqueror. And even still, when they attacked the city, there was very few people who actually were defending the Byzantine Empire at this point. And so they had to lay siege on the city. And that is what they do, and the Ottomans do actually manage to come through and take over Constantinople, and they will rename it Istanbul, which is the city of Islam. Now, the most important leader is actually not Mehmet, not Osman. It's actually Suleiman the Magnificent. So this is Suleiman the Magnificent, and he is the one who leads to the Ottoman Empire at its greatest height, and this is it here. Now, just expanding your empire might make you the great, or what makes him the Magnificent, or as the Ottomans called him, the lawgiver, is because of the other things that he did. So we call him the lawgiver because he was very open-minded in many ways. He really believed that he had a lot of different people living in his kingdom, and he wanted people to be peaceful. So he actually allowed for Christians and Jews to maintain peaceful livelihood in the Ottoman Empire, but they had to pay a special tax. So there actually were Christians and Jews who converted to Islam just because they didn't want to pay the tax. But he also took European law and Islamic law. So if you remember from studying Islam, Sharia is Islamic law. So he combined both of those, and that's why he's considered to be the lawgiver. He also did a lot to make a more efficient government by reforming the tax system, improving the bureaucracy, like all the people who work for the government. But his legal code is what he is most remembered for. He also made it very peaceful for people to live in his empire, and so this is kind of a much after he does the conquest, it's a fairly peaceful time. So you can see here in this particular picture, this mosque that's a little bit closer to you, this is called the Yeni Mosque. Yeni means new. It was built in the 1600s, so it's kind of funny that it's considered the new mosque. This one that you see further up on the hill is actually the Süleymaniye Mosque, which means that it was built by Suleiman. Now, part of his tax was actually a human tax. It was called the children's levy. And one of those, so the families would give a child. It actually was a great opportunity for them because you could rise up in ranks. And one of those was an architect by the name of Sinan. So he was a Christian given by his family to work for the country and became one of the most important advisors under Suleiman. So Sinan built this gorgeous mosque called the Süleymaniye Mosque. It sits on one of the 7 hills of Istanbul, and it is just absolutely beautiful inside. This is a picture inside. I remember the first time that I went inside the Süleymaniye Mosque. I was like, wow, this is gorgeous. Why do I like this design so much? Well, one of my favorite buildings in the entire world is the Hagia Sophia, which hopefully you learned about in World History 1. It was the most important church in Christianity for 1,000 years, and it's actually located in Istanbul. And I love the design of it. It was built by Justinian. And Sinan actually tried to copy that style when he built this. So we see that Byzantine architecture of the arches and the domes. And so Islamic architecture in Turkey especially is very influenced by the Byzantine Empire. All right, so what are the Ottomans known for trading? Well, one of the things that they're known for trading is ceramics. If you ever come to my classroom, you'll see some Turkish pottery on display. And they were definitely known for their beautiful ceramics. The tulip actually originated in Turkey, and you'll see the tulip design a lot. Also, things blue and red were very popular, and also the carnation. They also traded coffee. Coffee actually originated in Turkey. So if you enjoy coffee, get a little Joe Beans, you can thank the Turks for that. They were known for their spices too, but who we know the most for their spices is going to be the Indians, the Mughal Empire. All right, so remember, it's not Constantinople, it is Istanbul. So you can sing the song to help you remember, but remember that they renamed Constantinople, Istanbul, the city of Islam. So eventually the Ottoman Empire will decline because of their inefficiency of government and because the population has increased and they really can't keep up with it. Inflation becomes a big problem. And one of the things I think is a very interesting thing to be thinking about this entire time that we're studying these empires is that when these empires are at their height, Europe is in the Dark Ages and they're really far behind. Now, after the Renaissance, Europe starts to catch up and move forward. But the Asian empires were so much further ahead of them. So why is it that the Asian empires don't continue to pursue and become even greater than the Europeans? Why is it that the Europeans will end up taking over and we see that the Asian empires are going to fall? So something to keep in mind and kind of wonder as we talk about that. So I'm just going to mention the Safavids really quick here because you don't really have to know them. The only thing I remember about the Safavids is where they're located because they did have a lot of conflict with the Ottomans. The Ottomans were never successful in conquering the Safavid Empire, though they sure did try. So they're bordered by the Ottomans on the west, the Mughals on the east, and they're in present-day Iran, and they practiced Shiite Islam, which is still the majority in Iran today, even though the majority of Muslims in the world, about 80%, are actually Sunni Muslims. So you can see here the empire. So I love their soldiers. Their soldiers are called Kizilbash, which means redheads, and it's because they wore these red hats. And so they had this military group. So we had the Ghazis and the Janissaries. The Janissaries were like the special services, the secret police of the Sultan. So we had the Sultan, who is the ruler in the Ottoman Empire. So Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. In Iran, they called them the Shah. And the Shah literally means king. And so they were known for their art and different things, but they specifically are known for trading rugs. Persian rugs, even today, are still one of the most wanted things kind of in the world. So their greatest leader is Abbas. He's Shah Abbas the Great, but his name Abbas means great. So literally it's like Shah the Great, the king, great. So he reigned for a long time. One of the reasons that I like him, is because he was more religiously tolerant than any other ruler. But he also expanded its empire to its height and made Isfahan the capital. You might also be confused. I keep saying Iran. Remember that Persia is Iran. And it's actually called Persia up until the modern times, when the late 1900s after World War I, that we begin to call it Iran. But just like all great empires, they begin to fall because they have unstable rulers and they're really having a hard time dealing with the Ottomans. So what they're really known for is their rugs. They're beautiful, beautiful rugs. All right, so super quick on that, let's move on to the Mughal Empire. So I'll tell you what's, so far, what do we got to remember? What do the Gunpowder Empires have in common? So we have the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal. What do they have in common? They all were Muslim, so they're all practicing Islam. They all had absolute rulers. So in The Ottoman Empire, we call the absolute ruler the Sultan. We call him the Shah in the Safavid Empire. We're also going to call him the Shah in the Mughal Empire as well, which in essence means king or emperor. Okay? So they're all Muslim. They all have absolute rulers. They all used military conquest. And if you want a fourth one, they're all Turkic people. Now, you need to remember the Ottoman capital, which is Istanbul. And you need to remember that they traded coffee and ceramics, and that their empire spread to 3 continents, Asia, Europe, and Africa. Okay? Now, for the Mughals, we're going to see their empire is not nearly as long-lasting as the Ottomans. Remember, the Ottoman Empire is for 600 years, and we're only going to see about 200 years for the Mughals. So the Mughals actually originate, from the Mongols. They had these princes called Rajputs who ruled like independent little areas in India. And the Mughals kind of come in and just unite all of them. Now remember that the Mughals are Muslim. That's what they're bringing. They bring Islam to India. But the people living in India are predominantly Hindu. So you can see here the expansion. Their greatest ruler is Akbar. And then most people, though, also remember Shah Jahan. So Akbar, I really like Akbar, just like I like Suleiman, because they're a lot alike. I really love leaders who are religiously tolerant, and he did that. He also unified and expanded his empire, just like Suleiman did as well. Just like Suleiman also organized his government to make it more efficient, so did Akbar the Great. So there's a lot that these guys have in common, okay? So Akbar rules for a long time. If you like Bollywood, there's a fantastic movie that is just called Akbar, and it's all about his life. So their economy is that they were predominantly farmers, but they also produced some important products like textiles and iron. So a lot of cloth. We're going to get a lot of cloth from this area. Cotton, really a valued commodity. We're also going to get jewels or gems, if you would like, so like rubies and emeralds and things like that. And spices. Spices are going to come here. So we're going to see Portuguese and English traders who start showing up on the coast of India and are like, hey, we want some of all this great stuff that you have. Now, after Akbar died, we start to see a decline in the Mughal Empire. And we're not going to see a really kind of great leader again until we get to Shah Jahan. Now, Shah Jahan is most remembered for building the Taj Mahal. We're going to look at a picture of this before, and I'm sure you've seen it before. The Taj Mahal, it looks like a mosque because that's in essence what it is. It was a tomb for his wife. He loved her so much. They had, I believe, 14 children together, and he loved her so much. He actually had plans to build another one that was completely opposite of hers, looking onto hers, and his would be made of black marble because hers is made of white marble. But he ran out of money. And so he did a lot of expensive campaigns and taxed the people heavily to pay for all these things. And as you can imagine, people did not like the heavy taxes, and as a result, it doesn't last. But the Taj Mahal is magnificent, absolutely beautiful. And as you can see here, you see the bit of the dome, that arch, that kind of style. And if you get up close and personal, you'll actually notice that this white marble actually has beautiful little roses and designs in it. So we don't have time to watch this video, but it's super short. And if you go to the Google Sites page, you can find this video here, and it shows you like all this amazing things. So if I was to say, what is the best example of Mughal architecture? The answer is the Taj Mahal. And it was a tomb built by Shah Jahan for his wife. Okay? So he tried to make Delhi, the capital, one of the most beautiful places in the world. He does a pretty good job of that. So after he dies, there's a lot of revolts. There's no more religious tolerance, and things just begin to break down. Then the British are going to come in, and that's just pretty much the end. Okay, so guys, that's everything that we need to know about the Gunpowder Empires. So remember who they are, the Safavids, the Mughals, and the Ottomans. Remember what they have in common. They're all Muslim. They all have absolute leaders. They all use military conquest. They're all Turkic peoples. What do they trade? Well, the Ottomans trade coffee and ceramics, and the Mughals trade textiles and jewels or gems and spices. The Safavids also trade rugs. Where are they located? The Ottomans started in Turkey and spread into North Africa and into Europe. They're in 3 continents. The Safavids are in present-day Iran or Persia, and the Mughals are in present-day India. Okay, so those are our big things that we need to know about these guys. And we're going to have 2 more empires left in this unit, and that is China and Japan.